Welcome to Superheroes of Science. I'm Stephen.
And I'm Sarah. We co-host Science from the Experts. Our guests are professionals doing cutting-edge science right now.
They're experts in their field discussing what they know best. So listen up and learn real science from real people.
Subscribe now and stay informed of our latest episodes and show your support. Today on Superheroes of Science, we are pleased to welcome Matthew Huber, the David E. Ross Director for the Purdue Institute for a Sustainable Future, and professor here in the Department of Earth, Atmospheric and Planetary Sciences.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here.
Yes.
Should you get that whole title right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a lot of titles.
It's a mouthful.
It's awesome.
You might be one of the few people who have a longer title than me. I like that. Well, let's start with the Center for Sustainable
for a Sustainable Future.
For a sustainable
The Institute for a Sustainable Future. Yes.
See, I'm not getting it right. You got it right to begin with. What exactly does that mean?
Yeah, so I think that we all want to live in a better world where people have clean drinking water and healthy food and live a long time and are economically in good shape and have clean air to breathe. And that's really what sustainability is about, is delivering those to people. And the Institute for Sustainable Future is about making that happen. So it's a transdisciplinary institute. It operates all across campus, across all the departments and all of the colleges. And we are aiming to bring solutions for a better world.
Now, I hear of institutes, centers, groups, all these different things, and I'm clumping together a little bit. But I guess I've always wondered, what the heck do they really do? And so your goal is to make a better world for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That's cool. That sounds great. But what do people really do? It's like you're working towards that, but it's sometimes I think we wonder outside of those, we wonder what is it they really do?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. I think in general, people wonder what professors do, which is always a good place to start. So, we are typically engaged in research as well as in teaching and in engagement with communities. So, broadly speaking, an institute like mine really draws on the strengths and the passion of the faculty for doing what they already do. So they're already doing research, they're already teaching, they're already engaged with communities. And so what we think about, in terms of our mission, is getting them beyond what they would normally be doing within their own department. So, if you have a research, a faculty member doing research and their area is in hurricanes, let's say, and let's say they're the world's expert in hurricanes. Well, that's great. But if we need to think about how can we make Indiana more resilient to storms in general, including, say, flooding or ice storms or winter storms or heat waves, we might bring in together somebody with a background in hurricanes and somebody with a big background in the regional weather of the Midwest, and get them together with somebody who makes better concrete and somebody who works on the logistics of trucks moving along our highways, and somebody who's thinking about dams, and somebody who's thinking about water quality, and somebody who's thinking about how communities respond to natural disasters, and put them in a room and say, well, what are the threats that are facing us in the future? How do we make our state, our region, our country more resilient to the threats that are facing us? And what kind of solutions might we build out to make that happen? So it could be leading to improvements in building codes, new technologies. Sometimes it's just a matter of better information for people so that they're better prepared. So we aim to take different kinds of people on campus and bring them together and make solutions happen.
Sounds like a lot of coordination and timing and a lot of things in that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm kind of lucky because in my job, what I get to do is help people. So I get to help faculty work together. That's actually my main job. Sometimes people think, well, sustainability is a big thing. How could you be an expert on that? I can't be an expert on all aspects of sustainability. So what I can do is say, well, I'm not an expert in that, but I know 5 people who are. But the problem is they're in 4 different departments and they don't talk to each other.
Right.
So how do we bring them together? How do we bring their postdocs in? How do we bring their graduate students, their undergraduate researchers? How do we get all of them talking and working together and maybe thinking about things in a new way?
We've both been in higher education for a while. And it seems to me when I'll say we, because we got here about the same time, like Purdue. And it seems like things used to be more, I want to say, siloed. And so people did their research in that area, they focused on that, and nothing really outside of that mattered. But it looks like things are going more towards, especially for institutes such as what you're at, is looking at that bigger picture. And it's not just collaboration, and it seems like we're trying to solve bigger problems and pulling the experts together to solve those bigger problems. Is that the future of science?
Yeah, I think so. So I got here in 2003 in the Jischke era. And at the time, there was a big push to make Purdue interdisciplinary. So creating what was then known as Discovery Park, now Discovery Park District, a lot of cross-college hiring initiatives and trying to bring in people who could work together. And we were successful at that. That was actually, we're still reaping the benefits of that investment from 20 years ago. But it's not just enough to have different kinds of people working together. You then have to say, well, maybe we'll have atmospheric scientists work with engineer to design better ways of routing rain during a flood. That's great. But what about the social scientists? What about the companies that will actually roll out the solution? Don't we need to be thinking about public-private partnerships? Don't we need to be thinking about taking fundamental science and translating it into products? Don't we need to think about the implications for products for society? Don't we need to be involving people who are on the streets in the decision making at the beginning, so that we make sure that whatever solutions we deploy are things that people actually want and will use? So I think that's how the science has grown, is not just talking together and thinking about what we might do together, but really thinking about end-to-end solutions that are developed and deployed over decades. That's a different kind of science, different kind of technology.
You're, I want to say by trade, a climate scientist, correct? Is that the fair way to put you in?
Yeah, it's a trade. It definitely is. I earn less money than my plumber does, and I have a lot of respect for my plumber because he's a very I don't know if being a plumber is a hard job, but he's like 6'8", and he's a plumber. So that that's an interesting situation. Yeah. So, but he's excellent, right? So he spent decades learning his craft, and that's what he's really, really good at. And so I have a lot of respect for people in the trades. And so my trade is climate modeling. So I started doing that as a graduate student. So about 25 years ago. And that's taking essentially codes and embodied physics and putting them on a computer and running very big computers for very long periods of time. The climate models I use are developed at the National Center for Atmospheric Research and are codes that have been used and developed by the community now for decades. So, I'm happy to be in that community.
So and here's a discussion we were having in a meeting yesterday, the importance of understanding how to code as a part of science. Is that something that's more and more important, in your opinion, that scientists have to understand some coding language?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I guess the way to think about it is that typically we would say math is the language of science, and that's true, but math by itself just kind of sits on a page. You have to do something with the math, and what we typically do with the math is put it onto a computer and then generate predictions about what's going to happen next. And so whether you're doing predictive modeling for what's going to happen in the future, or data-driven modeling where you're trying to take data inputs and run it through some code and say, well, what's happening right now or in the very near future? All of that, if you don't know how to code, it's like not knowing a language. It's just not being able to translate ideas into something that actually does something.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
And it seems like the world is data science now. Everything is, literally everything, from advertising to high-level research.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we are swimming perennially in data, and everything we do leads a data trail. We eat data in the morning, and we excrete data all day long. So it's kind of a big cycle of data. So I think of myself, at least one of the hats that I wear is as a data scientist and a computational scientist. And that's one of the initiatives we want to move ahead with in the Institute for Sustainable Future is Purdue Compute's sustainability. And the thinking there is that Purdue is moving in the direction of having major computing, semiconductor, data-oriented initiatives. And in the field of sustainability science, in the broad sense, we do that all the time. Plus, there's the sustainability of semiconductors themselves. You can't make that. You can't make computers without critical materials.
Mm-hmm.
Critical materials, well, that's geology. Like, you have to go and find that stuff. And you can't make them without water. Well, that's hydrology and hydrogeology and engineering. So you can't do any of the things. You can't generate the data. You can't analyze the data unless you have people on the ground finding the raw materials and making these things. So there's a whole sustainability of computing as well.
Oh.
So that's an area I think that Earth, atmospheric, and planetary sciences has a lot to contribute to. Is how do we build better computers? It's not just engineering; it's the materials and the fabrication.
As someone who's leading these initiatives, how in the world do you get people? Let's say I'm a geologist. Yeah, I understand my rocks, geomorphology. I understand how things have changed, how it changes over time, and how the landscape maybe changes. How would you talk someone like me into going out of that comfort zone and collaborating to look at? No, we want to look at sustainable technology. We need your expertise in this. How do you approach people and help them see that bigger picture?
Well, you always start off with common ground and what somebody knows and where they're coming from. I mean, the thing about earth scientists, just as a group, they tend to be systems thinkers. And systems thinkers, they're used to saying, I don't necessarily know all the details about everything, but maybe I don't need to. I'm looking at how the system behaved, and I accept the fact there's unknowns. But I can see if I have this input, I get that output on a repeated basis. And geomorphology would be a classic example of that. Like, you may not understand exactly the detail of how, every glacier eroded out every glacial valley, but basically glaciers lead to U-shaped valleys. I think that earth sciences is a great background because it leads you to think about systems and how they link together. And we live in a world of systems. They may be data systems. They may be computational systems. They may be social, economic systems. But, actually earth science is a great background for doing that. And, specifically to your example, I could go to what are chips made out of? Well, chips are made of silicon. Well, where does that come from? Well, it's sandstone. So what's the major source of that? Oh, well, not far away from here, we have the St. Peter sandstone, which is kind of the most clean and pure sandstone on Earth. And it's a couple 100 million years old, giant inland sea type thing that was laying down, and, it's ultra pure and it doesn't have a whole lot of contaminants, so you can just take it and make chips with it. So this is something that, geological processes created this sandstone hundreds of millions of years ago. And then glaciers came in and covered it up, 10 meters of glacial till. But it's just sitting there as an economic resource that's then mined and turned into chips. Mm-hmm. So it's just kind of amazing. You can go back from, basically geomorphological things that were happening in deep time and say, well, we couldn't build chips without this stuff. So, you can always bring it full circle.
Fair enough. I like that.
We live in an integrated system. So.
What incentive are for them to collaborate? Is it they're going to have more research opportunities, thus they keep their jobs and be able to progress their careers? Is that the main incentive to keep people?
Yeah, well, finding incentives for people is always a challenge in academia because, with the exception of untenured professors, most people, they have a job for life.
Yeah.
And frankly, it's not money or what most people would think of as success that drives people in academia. It is some deep curiosity they have, some deep passion that they have, which may not always be explicable to other people. So you have to find that for somebody. So some people, they just really like robots. If they had a chance, they would just be sitting in a room playing with robots all day. But they're lucky because they got to be a professor of robotics. And so they may be looking for, wow, I could send robots to other planets for space probes. I could send, robots into drains to study the movement of fluids within drain pipes. I could send robots into people and study the interactions going on inside of a human gut, or maybe into a cow's gut to understand the production of methane in there. So I think that for just about everybody, you have to find out why they do things and then kind of pull on that string. And I like to think of my job as involving, I have just like a bag full of a bunch of little carrots. I have no sticks. I can't fire anybody. I can barely even hire anybody. All I can do is say, here's something that I know that you want to do. And I'm going to give you a little bit of an incentive. It could be money to bring people together and have pizza once a month. I mean, in that sense, it's easy to incentivize faculty because we were all graduate students.
Yeah.
We work for pizza, right? Like if you give us a little bit of Coke, a little bit of, a little soda over here, a little pizza over here, we're good to go. So, I have very small carrots, and ideally, I don't have to do too much convincing, because if you present people with a good idea or they present me with a good idea, it's a no-brainer. I say, well, how can I help make that happen? And then I just try and find the resources to do that. And typically, it's not as much as you might think.
Mm-hmm. Were you going to ask something?
No.
All right.
No.
Well, I am. It's totally off topic too, but it's something you had said kind of triggered in my head because I know a lot of people who don't understand how tenure works for a faculty.
Yeah.
And they just heard you say, well, yeah, a tenure professor has a job for life. They don't have to worry about anything. And so how does a person actually get tenure? It's not just that, they've been around long enough, they get this and they don't have to worry about anything. So there's a lot of work and not everyone makes it.
Mm-hmm.
And so would you be willing to go ahead and explain how does how does a person do tenure at a research, an R1 institution like this?
Yeah, absolutely. So the tenure process, somebody comes in typically out of graduate school, or maybe they were a postdoctoral fellow for a number of years, and they come in, and it's a lot like being a startup in a company. So you come into a department and you're expected to start a successful research program, as well as teach, as well as be a good departmental citizen and a good mentor to graduate students. It's quite a job. But it's not that much different than starting your own company. You're essentially given X number of dollars, you're given a lab, you're given a support facility to help you do your science, and then you're expected to build a group, write grants, publish papers, make the necessary connections so that you have a network that you can rely on to help you get your science done. And then it's just 4 to 6 years of 12-hour days, 6 days a week to make it happen. And at the end of that, it's a thumbs up or thumbs down decision about whether you stay. And that system is very good at encouraging, really the people who can put in the effort and also who can make advances in a relatively short amount of time. And 6 years, I don't know whether 6 years sounds like a long time or a short time to people. For an academic, 6 years is a short amount of time. It's just enough time to come in and have, maybe one cadre of graduate students graduate. You might come in, hire a graduate student or two, and just as you go up for tenure, they might actually graduate. And it's time for one or two grants to have been successfully funded. And I know for the work that I do, between conception of an idea, getting a proposal funded, bringing on a graduate student or a postdoc, writing the papers and seeing them published is about 5 years.
Okay.
So, it's quite the effort. But the thing is, once you have tenure, or at least once you've developed that kind of base, then it grows. And that's part of what the Institute exists to help people do, is be an incubator. If you think about these things as startups, tenure track faculty is starting up a little company, and then maybe it starts growing. One of the jobs of the Institute is to say, you've got a great mom and pop shop. You're very successful. You're doing well. But how do I help you grow that into like a major entity and go from 4 employees to 50 employees? So that's really what we were trying to do ultimately, is grow these large transdisciplinary teams and take them from a couple of mom and pop shops, get them to work together, and now you have something that's more substantial and can scale up. You don't want to be a bakery and then suddenly become successful, because if there's 4 employees and now everybody wants your baked goods at the exact same time, you'll just have a bunch of unhappy customers, right? So we've got to be able to take people who really have a niche product, right? So they have been in graduate school for 4 to 10 years, and they're a postdoc, and then they start this mom and pop company, which is their tenure phase. And then once they're tenured, it's like, we want you to grow, we want you to expand, we want you to do new things. And so that's a large part of what we try to do, is incubate that.
Well, that's cool.
That's a great explanation.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
That's what I think. Like, wow.
I mean,
Well, my wife spent a number of years working at Smitty Bread, so I know all about what happens when a bakery becomes very successful. You get a lot of people who get burnt out working there.
yeah.
I have no doubt. It's actually bringing personal experience in. That's awesome. But I do like that. I've always been impressed with the fact that as a assistant, associate professors, you're there, you're proving that you can contribute to the knowledge of mankind. You're proving you can do science, and you can do quality science, and you can publish that science and get it out there to be seen in the community and evaluated. I love that. To me, it would scare the heck out of me. I mean, because it's you live, you have your soul in everything you write, and then it's like you are being constantly judged on it. So
this is true. I mean, it's actually it's only after you've been doing it for a little bit that you realize, like a lot of initially your stress is, can I get this paper published? And then you realize afterwards your stress is, oh my God, the paper's published. Now people are reading it.
Yeah.
And now people all over the world can judge me. That it's all down on paper. I can't walk this back. I can't say I didn't mean that. No, I spent 4 years doing this. I can't say like there's something in there I didn't really mean. And if people think your idea is dumb or wrong, they'll tell you in nice scientific polite language. But then you realize there's many, many smart people in the world, and they are all out, because we're scientists, they're all out to prove you wrong. And so that is the most nerve-wracking thing, actually, isn't you when you start, you think, oh, the nerve-wracking thing is getting published or getting a grant or getting tenure. And then you realize afterwards, no, it's what you do afterwards. It's the consequences of that those are the real sources of stress. I published a paper now, so I published in 2010 on the importance of moist heat stress for planetary habitability. And, it started off just as a theoretical paper, like, so could it get so hot and so humid that, like, mammals couldn't survive? I mean, literally just like a what if question. Like, you're just sitting around drinking beers and it's just like, what if, right? Well, that's basically the great thing about being a scientist. You can ask a what if question, and rather than just saying, nobody knows, you can now, spend a couple of years and try and answer it. So that's what my colleague Steve Sherwood and I did. I gave a talk saying the world used to be a lot hotter, and he asked that question: well, did it get so hot that mammals don't survive? And then we worked on it, and we wrote a paper. We thought it was pretty good, and we pushed for it. And, got rejected at one journal, got submitted to another, and got published. And initially, it was all about getting the paper published, and then it was like, oh God, we wrote a really scary and depressing paper. What if we're right?
No.
Right? Which actually hadn't really occurred to me, because the conclusion of the paper was, yeah, it could get so hot that 50% of all mammals die. And we did it, just like, what if?
Uh-huh.
And then we published a paper, and then it was like, oh, wait, this has implications for real people. Huh. Yeah, I hadn't really thought about that a whole lot before publishing the paper. I really hope we're right, but I also hope that we're wrong, right? As a scientist, you don't want to publish anything incorrect. You want to
realize half the world's going to die.
Yeah, you want to know that your math was right and your physics was right.
Right.
But then at the end of the day, you don't like the conclusion, and then you sit there and you say, "Huh, wow, I didn't know that. Oh, now I'm a little depressed." So sometimes it's actually the success. It's the dog who catches the car driving by that is like, huh, wow. So that I think oftentimes is a bit of a maybe a letdown for people. They get tenure, and then they're like, really? I've literally worked for like 10 years of my life, and I finally got here, and I'm like, is this all there is? And then you start looking at full professor.
Yeah.
So then that's the next hill you have to climb. That's the thing, is people who make it through the academic enterprise are all people who are always thinking about what's that next hill they have to climb. They tend not to coast until they hit a certain age. Then some of them coast.
You have that with any job, though.
but exactly.
The ones that have been there long enough, they're efficient. They can get what has to be done.
Yeah.
And they kind of glide through a lot of times.
Yeah.
Then others that's been there forever, they just don't stop.
Yeah.
And it's hard to keep up.
Yeah, I'm interacting with a senior professor right now, and man, he has the energy of 4 assistant professors. It's like, oh gosh, what. You could take a break, dude. You're a distinguished professor. You can calm down. But graduate school and that whole process selects for people who they really just can't stop, because it's a real passion of theirs.
Well, that's a direction I didn't think we'd end up going.
Yeah.
But I was curious. You said something about the having tenure and stuff. I'm like, I always wondered. I live it, and so I know a lot, but most people don't.
Yeah.
And so I think it's something a lot of people kind of wonder what in the world's really going on there.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah.
Well, it is a gift, and it's a privilege, and therefore you really need to have a process that tends to winnow people out, so you're not giving this privilege out to people who are going to abuse it. And that is why it is a very challenging process. And I think a lot of people, maybe if they look at discussions of this on social media, they'll think, oh God, why is it such a harsh process? But you have to look at it like, I am paid by the state. I am paid by taxpayers, and given this privilege of it basically, being a job that I can go for a long period of time, and you have to take that very seriously. And the way I look at it, so that's part of why I'm director of this institute. Is this part of my land grant mission? Mm-hmm. It's part of the university's land grant mission that I'm contributing to. When I was doing what was climate like 100 million years ago, that's still fundamental science, but it's a little bit less kind of returning value and paying people back for the privilege that I'm given. But as director of an institute that's focusing more on helping to translate science into solutions, that's how I pay it back.
That's awesome. I love that.
Yeah.
I don't stop doing my fundamental science. I'm still gonna.
I would say you're still doing research.
I'm still doing it. But it like as I was saying before, you maybe you start your mom and pop shop and you're doing it, and we want you to do other things too. But that doesn't mean you should ever stop.
Yeah.
doing that thing that you were really good at, right? You should keep doing. You should just add more things to your portfolio. So that's what I've done, and that's one of the things that we encourage people to do in the Institute is take what they're doing. You're awesome at it, but you know what? You set this up. It can kind of run itself. Let's take your entrepreneurial instinct, your drive, your intelligence, and let's now say, what are 2 other things that you might do? And for the right faculty member, they're ready for that. So not everybody is, right? And you have to meet people where they are. You can't. So I can tell you, when we're talking about incentives, what does not work? What does not work is some upper level administrator or a dean or a department head saying everyone needs to write big proposals.
Yeah.
What you get is a bunch of low quality effort.
Right.
What you have to do is say, you're all smart, you're all driven, you know that it'll be good for society, good for the university if we write large proposals. But how do we actually make that happen? How do we make that happen naturally? You can't just say, do it. You have to take some time and develop relationships. So that's the perspective that I've taken is we can't just throw together teams of people who don't know each other, don't necessarily respect each other because they come from different disciplines, they speak different languages, scientific languages. So you have to bring them together and you have to take the time to get to know them. And that can take years. It's not a quick process. If you want to bring social scientists together with engineers, together with people from agronomy, it takes time.
Yeah.
But for solving the problems that we need to solve as a society, we absolutely have to have that kind of knowledge of each other and ability to work together. So that's what we do. We take the time. So we build research communities, which are all about people getting to know people. And then we have special initiatives where once some ideas emerge from that getting to know you process, then we can fund the development of that idea to something that might scale up. And not everything is going to make it. So some ideas you provide some seed funding or some ability to generate preliminary results or grow, and not everything pans out. So there's a certain amount of risk and we accept that. But then some ideas emerge from that process as potentially very successful. So they're already, that team may be bringing in millions of dollars in grants, having large groups, generating fantastic science, deploying solutions for the real world. And then we say, okay, maybe you can be like a national center for the X, Y, or Z. Maybe this is something that now is not just competitive within Purdue or regionally. Maybe this is something that is competitive nationally and internationally. And so then we try and make the necessary investment funded through the Executive Vice President for Research Office, take that and see if we can bring that to the next level, help them scale up for that kind of national or international scale center level proposal effort.
Cool. I love that you talk about that it takes time to build those relationships because I think from the outside, you're thinking, well, that makes sense, right? They have engineers, they have social scientists,
Right.
they should be working together. But then realistically speaking, you can't just force that to happen. I love how you explain that. That makes a lot of sense.
Well, and that's, this is obvious to some people from the beginning, but not for everybody. And it certainly took me time to get to know this, but it is really all about the people. And by people, it's not just faculty, it's students, it's early career researchers of various sorts, and it's staff, right? Like staff are, in many ways, the institutional memory and the glue, right? Because administrators, they come and go. You have department heads who become deans, who become provosts, and then leave, right? So you have this whole kind of chain of being, and it typically leads to people leaving where they are and moving on to the next phase. And oftentimes, the people who actually know how to get things done and do it are the staff. And they oftentimes are the ones who are not featured in university publications campaigns or in the RAISE merit pool, but they should be. So I sit on the external review committee of various departments and institutes outside of Purdue. And that's the point I always try and make is it's not just about cluster hires and bringing in new faculty, and it isn't just about growing your endowment. The fact of the matter is a lot of what everything that gets done is done by staff. So what are you doing to protect your staff, to grow them professionally, keep them happy? Which is all goes in the heading of, I think that people are really important in this process, and you have to deal with people as people and not just units of growth or income.
Right. Yes.
It's easy apparently to overlook.
Yeah.
Based on being here a long time and seeing and watching and
Yeah.
like.
Well, and the flip side to that is you can't have a system that works only because there's one person who has the knowledge,
Yes.
right? I mean, so that's the flip side to that is people and individuals matter. But if you have a system that doesn't work, and it only works because there's that one person who knows how to do things, that's not a system that's sustainable. So you need to have systems that you're constantly propagating knowledge from people to the rest of the system, and you have redundancy, which, from a business perspective, redundancy is bad. It's actually the word we use, making people redundant to get rid of them, right? But redundancy and the ability to have failover is what is necessary in a constantly evolving system. If you want, I'm speaking the language of resilience, which is part and parcel of sustainability, right? So if you want to have an institution be resilient, you have to have those things. You have to have a certain amount of strong networking so people know who to talk to, no single points of failure. So if you take one person out of it, everything stops working. You can't have that, right? And it's very important for departments, colleges, institutes, universities to really carefully consider that. And sometimes that just involves linking together two networks, because one network might have a person who is a single point of failure, but there's actually another network over here. And there's an analogous person in another institution. And if they were working together, you would no longer have a single point of failure.
Right.
So this is the sort of thing that I actually spend an inordinate amount of time thinking about, because I'm thinking across departments and across colleges. So I'm not just thinking about the role that one person plays in a college or a department. I'm thinking about the fact that now that I've met with everybody, I know there's 10 different people who play that role.
Mm-hmm.
Shouldn't they talk? Shouldn't they share their experience?
Yeah.
Shouldn't there be a central place where that information is put, so that if one of them leaves or retires or gets another job, that knowledge is kept? And so we actually in the Institute are spending a lot of our time thinking about that, how to make things as a system work better.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
That's why there's always the two of us that do projects and stuff.
Yeah.
And if my kid's sick, I gotta be gone a day.
Yeah.
I don't have to worry about it. I know she's got it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the same with her.
Yeah.
And she knows, that program's still gonna run fine.
Yeah.
Where in the past, we've canceled big programs because a person has not been able to do it. I was sick or something. I'm like, I can't, run out of fever, can't leave home.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, an entire program shut down for a day.
Right.
And it was inefficient and stressful. Or now it might still be stressful, but at least we know that someone else can. And so we've worked on that even in our little part of the world.
Yeah.
And we saw the importance of that, and many people have reaped the benefit of that. Being able to keep the programs going.
Right.
And if you think, COVID was a really good wake-up call, I think, globally for the importance of that a lot of things were cut so lean, in the interest of efficiency. And there were real benefits to that. So, just-in-time production, the fact that you could have something be manufactured in China and 3 days later, I have a new phone sitting on my desk, right? And I only configured on the computer 3 days ago, and somehow, it all came here almost by magic. But then you realize, I see the benefits to that, but you've opened yourself up for, if there's any link in that chain that breaks, that the whole thing fails.
Yeah.
And we're still dealing with supply chain disruption. I go to restaurants and there's basic things that aren't on the menu.
Yeah.
Things that are made locally here in Indiana, but I can't get them at a restaurant because there's some part of the process that involves something coming from Germany. And that it just isn't happening right now. So, I think that's one of the things that COVID has really taught us, is that we need to be building into all of our plans resilience, and the fact that if you have a long chain of things that all have to happen perfectly for things to work out, that doesn't always happen. So you have to build in resilience into the system to have it function over longer terms. And when you start realizing that, it makes you rethink how everything is done, which that is the sustainability mindset. It's saying we don't just want to optimize it for efficiency right now. We want to make sure it will continue to work when the lights go off, and when there is an invasion in another country. We want to make sure that our energy supply locally continues to function when one country, one place invades another country somewhere else, right? Like, it's thinking through all of the possible risks and threats and trying to make a system that works most of the time rather than just when things are good. So it's a tough road because it requires planning and forethought.
Yeah.
And you realize that some people don't actually like planning and forethought. They see it as a threat, right? And so, it doesn't take a PhD to do planning and forethought, right? I mean, anybody who wants to can do it. But once you start thinking about it, you realize you have to start thinking about a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
And what seems simple might be complex now. So I try and deal with the complexity. I used to just say, simplify, simplify, simplify until it's a problem I can solve. And then you realize real world problems aren't like that.
Right.
And you have to deal with the complexity and also deal a little bit with failure, because that means that part of what you're trying to solve, you can't.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe 75% solution that works is better than 100% solution that no one can deploy.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time.
Yes.
Yeah, well, thank you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
I appreciate this.